Hello guys, my name is Dennis Kadiri. Welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to be introducing you, or I am going to be introducing you to Python. Python is a programming language. If this is your first time learning how to use a programming language, or you are about to start your programming or code writing journey and you want to start with Python, trust me, it is highly recommended and you are on the right track. Because Python is very easy to learn, it's very easy to comprehend compared to other programming languages like Java, JavaScript, and the rest. Plus, Python is widely used all over the world and it's a highly sought out skill. So I'm not going to bore you with too much talk, so we're going to get right into how to use Python. But before we do that, first I'm going to show you how to get Python on your PC, how to download it and install it. But if you are wondering if your PC has Python in it and you want to know how to check that and also what version you have in your PC, you can head over to the search and then search for command prompt. So there I have the command prompt as the best match. Click on it to open. So immediately the command prompt is open. Let's zoom in a bit. You are going to search for Python space and then 2- version and then hit on the enter button on your keyboard. So when you do that, it's going to show you the latest version of Python that you have in your PC. But if you are seeing something different, that means you don't have Python in your PC. So you are going to have to download one. So to download Python on your PC, you are going to head over to your browser and then you are going to search for python.org. This is the official website to download Python on your PC. When you're on the site, you are going to see something like this. So right here, I have this download Python button. Click on it to kick off your download. This will download the latest version of Python on your PC. When the download is done, go ahead and hit on the exe to begin the installation process. It's a very easy and straightforward process. No long talks on that. So after downloading and installing Python on your PC, now when you head over to command prompt, now when you search for Python hyphens and then version, it's going to show you the latest version of Python that you have downloaded in your system. Now that is how to download Python on your PC. After downloading Python on your PC, to launch it, once again head over to your search and then search for Python. There you are going to find the Python app as the best match. Click on it to open. Now that will open the Python terminal. So right now I can write codes and run them. So for instance, if I type in 1 + 1 and I hit on enter on my keyboard, you see it gives me 2 as my answer. When I say print hello world, and then close the parentheses, you say it prints hello world. So let's say I type in something like, what is 2 + 2? And I hit on enter. Right there you see it throws an error because I'm using a wrong syntax. Now syntax are rules that guide how you write codes in Python. Now I use a wrong syntax right there. I combined strings and integers together, which is a wrong combination. So when you type in or input wrong syntax, it's going to throw an error. As you can see right here, it says syntax warning, telling me the type of error that I made. So one thing you should also know that when you have a block of codes in Python, Python starts executing code from top to bottom. So it starts with the topmost line of the block of code you have and deals with it from the top right to the bottom. So just take note of that. So you just learned how to download Python on your PC, install it, and then how to write codes and run them. There are other programming languages out there where you have to write your code and then you have to compile them before you'll be able to run them. But in Python, you don't have to compile them. After writing the code in Python, Python will automatically compile and then run the code for you. So that's one neat and interesting thing about Python. Aside writing codes in here within Python, you can also write codes in external files like, let's say, text editors, and then run them in Python. So for example, I have Notepad right here in my system, Windows. So if I search for Notepad and I click on open, now this is Notepad. So let's maximize this. So right here, when I type in print, let's say hello world. So right here, I have my source code. So to be able to run this source code in Python, first of all, I will have to save the source code as a standard Python file. I missed the quotation mark right there, so I just added it. So you have to, like I said, you have to save the file as a standard Python file. So to do that, first of all, you are going to head over to Files and then click on the Save As button. Immediately you click on the Save As button, it's going to give you this Save As dialog. So right here, I can choose the location where I want the file to be saved, which is my desktop. And then next, within the file name field, I can type in whatever name I want to give it. So for now, let's say source code. So after typing in the file name, you are going to make sure that the Python extension is added. Now the extension to save a file as a Python file is .py. Other programming languages have their own extensions. For example, when you want to save a JavaScript file, you add .js as the extension. HTML, we have .html as the extension. CSS, we have .css as the extension. But for Python, we have .py. So if you don't add the extension, or if you forget to add the extension, it's going to save the file as a regular text file. So I don't want that because when you have it as a regular text file, you will not be able to run the code in Python. So after typing in the name and then the extension, you can go ahead and click on the Save button down here. Let's close this. So right here on my desktop, I have the Python file I just created. And if you look at the icon closely, you see that, so this is up here, you see that it's a Python icon, which means it's a Python file. So to run the code in the file, I'm going to head over to the command prompt. And then right here, I'm going to type in Python to make the system understand that I want to run a Python file. So I'm going to click and drag this in here. Now, when I hit on enter on my keyboard, see, it prints as the value hello world. So that's it. That's how to write your source code and then run it in Python. So you just learned how to write codes in external files and then run them in Python. But that is not the most efficient way in writing codes or to write codes. But it is highly recommended if you are a beginner in writing code. It will help you to master code writing. But the most efficient way to write codes is to use an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. There are a bunch of IDEs out there that you can use to write code. For example, we have Atom, we have Sublime Text, we have Bluefish, Brackets, Espresso, Ultra Edit, Web Builder, PHP Storm. There are a lot of them. Some are free, while some are premium. You have to pay to be able to use them. But the one which I use and I find it more efficient is Visual Studio Code or VS Code. VS Code is completely free. It is a powerful source code editor by Microsoft and is available for Windows, macOS, and Linux. It has built-in support for JavaScript, TypeScript, and Node.js, and has a rich ecosystem of extensions for other languages and runtimes like C++, Java, Python, PHP. Again, it is free and open source. So to download Visual Studio Code on your PC, you are going to head over to your browser. And then on the search, you are going to search for code.visualstudio.com. This is the official website to download Visual Studio Code on your PC. When you're on the site, you are going to see something like this. So down here, within this download for Windows button, when you click on this arrow button pointing downwards, you'll see that you can download the code editor on all the major operating systems. We have macOS, Windows, and Linux. So click on the button that matches the operating system you are using to kick off your download. Or the site will automatically detect the operating system you are using, just the way it did here for me. It said download for Windows. So when you click on the download for Windows button or download for whatever operating system you are using, it's going to kick off your download. So when the download is done, go ahead and click on the exe to begin the installation process. Once again, it's very easy and straightforward. After downloading and installing Visual Studio Code on your PC, to launch it, head over to your Windows search and search for Visual Studio Code. There you are going to find the Visual Studio Code app as the best match. Go ahead and click on it to launch. So when you launch Visual Studio Code for the first time, you're going to see something like this. So it's going to land you on the Get Started page. So right now, before we do anything, first of all, we are going to have to configure Visual Studio Code so you'll be able to write Python codes and run them. So to do that, head over to the extensions activity down here. And then on the search, you are going to search for Python. Let me expand this. So down here at the top, you are going to find the Python extension as the best match. So you are going to click on it. The next thing you are going to do is to install this extension in Visual Studio Code. I have the extension installed already, but if you don't have it installed, go ahead and hit on the install button somewhere around here in your screen to kick off the download, and then it will go through the installation process automatically. So when you are done installing the Python extension, next you are going to make Python as your interpreter for Visual Studio Code. First of all, let's close out of this. To do that, you are going to head over to your command palette, head over to view, and then click on the command palette option up here. Or you can simply use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+Shift+P to open the command palette. And then on this field, you are going to type in Python -select interpreter. And then hit on the enter key on your keyboard. So immediately you do that, down here you are going to select the latest version of Python that you are using. So right here I have two versions, and the latest one is Python 3.11.2. So I'm going to select that. So right now I have my Python extension installed, and I have Python selected as my interpreter. So that's okay. So I'm going to close out of the extension. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to open the source code we created earlier in Visual Studio Code. So to do that, I'm going to head over to File and then Open File. And then you're going to get the Open File dialog. So I have the source code in my desktop. I'm going to select my desktop. Here I have it. Click on it and then hit on the Open button down here. So do you trust the author of these files? Yes, I do. So I'm going to click on Open. So now you see the look and feel of Visual Studio Code is way more better than using a text editor to write code. Right here, I have my function highlighted in different colors and the values in different colors. IDEs make your code writing experience fun and easy. So right here, if I hit on enter, when I create more lines, you see that I have number lines. So with these number lines, I can easily read my codes. Unlike the text editor earlier on or Notepad that didn't have number lines and many other beautiful features. When I hover over any values, let's say for instance, I hover over this print function right here, you see it gives me an insight of what the print function is, what it does, and what kind of values I can input within the parentheses. So that is it. There are a lot of other features you will enjoy using IDEs. It kind of beautifies your work. So to run the code, I can hit on this Run Python File button, which has the play icon. So when I do that, down here it opens the terminal and I get the value hello world. So that is it, guys. That's how to download Visual Studio Code, configure it, and run your code in it. So if you want to learn more about Visual Studio Code, I have a beginner's tutorial on how to use Visual Studio Code on this channel. I have the link to the video in the description of this video. You can go ahead and hit on the link to see that video. And also, if you find this video helpful so far, please do well to support this channel by liking the video and also subscribe and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post a new video like this. Next, let's talk about data types. There are multiple data types in programming, but there are 4 data types you should take note of, which are integers, floats, strings, and Boolean data types. Integers are basically numbers. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to get rid of this. So for example, 1 is an integer, 2 is an integer, 3 is an integer, 1000 is an integer, 10,000 is an integer, 1 million is an integer. So basically, all whole numbers are integers. So one thing you should also take note of when writing an integer, let's say for example, you have a big number like 1,450. You don't have to add punctuation mark. That is, you don't have to add a comma here. If you do that, Python is going to misinterpret it and then it will throw an error. For example, let's say print 1 plus 1. And then I run this code. Down here, it gives me 2. But what if I say 1 plus 1,450? When I run the code again, it gives me 1,451. But if I add a comma and I run this code, you see Python misinterprets it. I have 2 and then 450. Now, what it did here is that it added these two values, 1 plus 1, which give us these two right here. And then the 450 is this one right here. The comma is making it treat 1 plus 1 and 450 as two different values. So avoid using punctuations when writing integers. Now the next data type is floats. Simply put, floats are decimal numbers. 0.1 is a float, 1.1 is a float, 2.12345 is a float, 45.00123 is a float. Next is strings. Strings are text. This is a string. This is also a string. This is not a string. A string is a text value. Now, if you notice, what differentiates these strings from this is the quotation mark. Any value between quotation marks automatically becomes a string. So this is not a string, so I'm going to get rid of this. Now these two lines right here are strings. If you notice, the difference between these two strings are the quotation marks. We have a double quotation mark string and we have a single quotation mark string. So if I say print and then open and close parentheses, and then on the next line, I do the same thing, print and then open and close parentheses, and then I run this program or the code, you see it prints both values. I have this is a string and this is also a string. Now what if in the string I have something like an apostrophe? Let's say this, for example, instead of this is also a string, I have this isn't a string. Now when I try to run this program or this code, you see right here it throws an error. It throws a syntax error. It said unterminated string literal. Now one thing you should also keep in mind is that when you are writing a string and you notice that within the string there's an apostrophe or a quotation, just like I have in this line of code right here. So what happened here is that I opened the string here, I opened the quotation right here. Along the line, I have this apostrophe here. Now, Python will not interpret this as an apostrophe, but it will interpret it as a closing quotation. So to avoid that, if I have an apostrophe in a string, I will not use a single quote string. I will use a double quote string. So if I change this single quote string to a double quotation, and I come down here to the end and I add a double closing quotation, now it understands that the string starts here and ends here, and this apostrophe is part of the string. It is not a closing quotation for the string or an opening quotation for the string. Now when I run this, it prints the string. Now up here, if I do like a reverse, let's say I have a single quote opening the string and then I have a single quote closing it. So right now within here, I can add a double quote. Let's say I'm trying to quote is A I have a double quote. Now, when I run this program, it will not throw an error. So basically, if you have a string value that has an apostrophe, use a double quote string. And if you have a string value that has a quotation in it, use a single quote string so that Python will not misinterpret the values. Still on strings, we have single line strings and we have multiple line strings. So let's get rid of this. So a single line string is a string that is on a single line. For example, like the example we saw earlier, let's say this is a string. Sorry, this is a single line string. It's a single line string because it's on one line. So the string is opening on one line and it's also closing on the same line, which makes it a single line string. But what if the values you want to add contains more than one line or occupies more than one line? That's where you use a multiple line string. Now, to create a multiple line string, you have to add 3 quotation marks. So let's say I'm on the second line right now. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then hit on enter. I'm going to get rid of this immersive control panel. So right now I have my cursor between the strings. So I'm going to hit on enter. So whatever I type in between these opening quotations and this close quotation at the bottom right here becomes a string. So I can say this is a multiple line string. I don't need to end the quotation right there. So as long as I am between the quotation marks, I can add as much lines as I want, which makes it a multiple line string. You can also do this with, let's say, a single quotation. So let's say 1, 2, 3, hit on enter. I'm going to get rid of this. Excuse me. Hit on enter. And then I can paste the same values down there. Now that is how you create a multiple line string and a single line string. So this is okay, let's create a single line string there with a single quotation. This is a single line string. So I have a double quotation single line string and I have a double quotation multiple line string, and down here I have a single quotation single line string, and down below I have a single quotation multiple line string. So that is all about strings for now. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now the next data type is Boolean. Now Booleans are true or false values. So let's say, for example, I have print, open and close parentheses, 3 is less than 4. Now when I run this code, down here I get true. Now this is a Boolean value. So if I change this less than to greater than, and I run the code one more time, I get false because 3 is not greater than 4. So it gives me a false value. So that's it for Boolean values. There's nothing complex about it. It's either true or false. So that's it for data types. They are pretty much easy to comprehend. So integers are numbers, whole numbers. Floats are decimal numbers. Strings are texts, while Booleans are true or false values. Next, let's talk about operators, how to work with numbers and operators, or integers and operators. So for example, we have addition. So let's say I have the plus sign in between 3 and 4. Now when I run this, it gives me 7. I can also do a subtraction by adding a subtraction sign up there. When I run the code one more time, it gives me -1. I can also do a multiplication. Let's say 3 times 4. Now the multiplication sign is represented by the asterisk sign. So when I run this code, there I get 12. For division, let's say 8 divided by 2. The division sign is represented by the forwarding slash. Now when I run this, I get 4. 4.0 actually down there. Now when I run this, I get 4. I can also do exponential. Let's say I want to raise 8 to the power of 2. Now to do exponential, I will add 2 asterisk sign up there. Now exponential is represented by 2 asterisk sign, just the way I have it right here, as you can see. Now when I run this, I get 64, which is 8 raised to the power of 2. I can also floor a number. For example, I have 7 divided by 3. Now when I run this code, you see I get 2.3 down here. Now what if I don't want these figures after the decimal? I just want the actual answer itself. So I can say 7 and then add 2 forward slash in the middle and then 3. Now this will give me just the answer without showing me the remainder. So when I click on the run button, you see down here I get 2. Now I can also do the reverse of that. I can decide to get just the remainder, leaving the actual answer. Now that will have to be 7 modulus 3. Now modulus is represented by the percentage sign. Now when I run this code, I get 1. So if you divide 7 by 3, the remainder will be 1. I hope you get that. So I have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponential, flooring, and then modulus. Now one thing you should also take note of is that Python has an order it deals with operators. So for example, if I have 2 plus 2 times 5 divided by 2. Now in what order do you think that Python is going to deal with these operators? Are we going to have 2 plus 2, which is 4, and then multiplied by 5, which is 20, divided by 2, and then our answer will be 10? So I'm going to run the code right now. Let's see if that's the case. So when I hit on the run button, it gives me 7.0. Now that's strange. Why? This is because Python has a specific order in which it deals with operators. If you have an expression, if there is parentheses in the expression or brackets, it will deal with the brackets first and then move to the exponential. Next, it will deal with the multiplication and then the division, addition, and lastly, subtraction. Now that is the order in which Python evaluates an expression. We have the parentheses, exponential, multiplication, division, addition, and then subtraction. To be able to remember this, there's an acronym for that. It is called PEMDAS. P-E-M-D-A-S. P-E-M-D-A-S. Where the P stands for parentheses, which is brackets. The E stands for exponential. M stands for multiplication. D stands for division. A stands for addition. And the S, of course, stands for subtraction. And mind you, Python deals with an expression from left to right. So for this expression, for example, we have 2 plus 2 times 5 divided by 2. So what happened here is that it evaluated 2 times 5 first, which is 10, and then moved on to dividing it by 2. Now if you divide 10 by 2, it gives you 5. So we now have 2 plus 5, and that is why we have 7 down here. Next, let's talk about comments. A comment is basically a text note that gives an explanation about the source code. So for example, I have this line of code right here, and I want to explain what this line of code does so that when someone else sees it, they will understand what the line of code does. So that is the use of comments, just to add description, just to explain what is inside your source code. So I'm going to bring this down. Now to add a comment, all you need to do is to add the hash sign, and then you can go ahead and type in whatever you want as the comment. So let's say this evaluates the expression. Now I just explained what this line of code does, so that when someone sees it, they will know that, okay, this is what it does. Now with this comment right here, it does not affect any part of the program or any part of the code. So when I run this, you see it still gives me 7. So comment does not affect your code in any way. I can even add the comment or a comment to the same line where I have the piece of code. So I will just type in the hash sign and then write, let's say, the same thing. This evaluates the expression. You see, when I run this again, it does not affect the code. But if I add the hash sign at the beginning of the code, so let's say the hash sign here, you see it comments out the code. Now when I run this, it will have no effect because there's no code there anymore. We just have comments. But if I get rid of that, it makes the code active again. I can add as many comments as I want, as long as the hash symbol is there. So I can say, I can add more lines, more. So that is it for comments. That is what comments do. They're used to explain what a block of code or a line of code does. Next, let's talk about variables. Variables are basically containers that hold values. Now, the best way to explain what a variable is to use an analogy. So let's say, for instance, I have a box, an empty box, and I have an object, let's say a spoon. Now, when I put the spoon inside the empty box, that box becomes a container for that spoon. It holds the value spoon. So whenever I come back to that box or I see that box, I will always remember, or I will know that that box has a spoon in it. It holds a spoon as its value. Now that box is a variable and it's holding the value spoon. So not until I change the value inside that box, which is the spoon, the value of that box remains a spoon. So let's say, for instance, I change the value inside the box, which is the spoon, to a ball. I get rid of the spoon, or I remove the spoon from inside the box and I put a ball in it. Now the value of that box changes from spoon to a ball. So it is the same idea with variables in Python. So let's say, for instance, I create a variable. Now to create a variable, let's say I type in box and I add the equals sign, which is the assigner. The equal sign helps to assign values to a variable. So let's say I type in the value spoon. Now this variable box is holding the value spoon. Now when I call this variable, let's say print box, and I run this code, down here it prints spoon because it is holding the value spoon. But what if I change the value? Let's say I change this from spoon to box, or to ball rather. Now when I run the code again, down here I get ball. It prints out ball because that's the current value of the box. So what if I create or I recreate the variable, let's say box down here, and I assign an integer, let's say 30 to it. Now what do you think it will print out? When I run the code, down here it prints out 30. Now, I know you might be wondering, why did it print out just 30 without printing the ball? Remember at the beginning of this tutorial, I told you that Python deals with code line by line from the top. So right here at the beginning of this code, I created the variable box and I assigned the value ball to it. And in the next line, I created the same variable and I assigned 30 to it. So when I ran the code, when it got to the first line, it saw the variable box and then the value of the box is a ball, and it takes that, and it went down to the next line. It sees the same variable. This time the value changes to 30, an integer. So it got rid of the previous value and then takes the current value. So on the next line, when I asked it to print, it prints out the current value which it took note of. So that is to say that Python takes note of the last and current value given to a variable. So no matter how many times you create a variable and no matter how many times you assign a value to it, it will take note of the current value or the last value you assign to the variable. So one thing I want you to also know is how to name a variable. When you are naming a variable, there are some information you should keep in mind. For example, The variable must contain letters, numbers, or underscore. Secondly, you cannot start a variable with a number. You can start it with a letter or an underscore. And spaces are not allowed. When naming a variable, you are not allowed to add space. So let's say, for instance, you want to create a variable that has 2 words in the name. So let's say, for instance, you are creating a variable, let's say source code. And then you are assigning a value to it. Now, this is not a variable name because of the space down here. You cannot add space within a variable name. Instead, you add an underscore. Now, that is a valid syntax for a variable name. Next, the variable name cannot be a keyword in Python. For example, break, try, if, print. Those are keywords in Python. You can go up to Google and search for Python keywords so you know them. You cannot add a keyword, or you cannot use a Python keyword as a variable name. Next, the variable name must be short and descriptive. Just where I created this box variable, it is very easy to understand. When you see it, you understand that I'm talking about a box. It must be easy to comprehend and short. And lastly, variable names are case sensitive. So in this example right here, we have on the screen, there's a difference between this box variable and this. So if I assign a value to this one right here, let's say value, and then I print box. Now when I run this code, okay, excuse me, let's get rid of this line. So when I run this, you see I get 2 values, 30 and value. This 30 belongs to this variable up here, and this other value belongs to this other box variable. So as long as the names are not identical, they are 2 different variables. So if you are using a different letter case when calling a variable, you are not referring to that variable. With the use of variables, I can extract or collect data from users. So let's say, for instance, I want to collect a specific data from a user. All I need to do is to ask the user a particular question, and they will give me a corresponding answer. So let me show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So let's say I want to ask for a user's name. So let's create a name variable. And then we are going to insert the input function. The input function is what you can use to collect information or collect data from users. So I'm going to type in input and then open brackets. Now within the open brackets, I added a quotation. Now within the quotation, that's where I am going to add the question that I want the user to answer. Now the question will act as a placeholder. So I'm going to say, what is your name? Question mark and then a space. Now when I go down here and I say print name, when I run this code, so down here, okay, let me clear this first of all and then run the code again. So down here I get this question, what is your name? Now it's asking the user what is their name. So all the user needs to do is to click down here and then say Dennis, if the user's name is Dennis. So after typing in their name, they can hit on enter and then the information is going to be saved. So that is how to use variables to get inputs from users or data from users, or to collect data from users with the use of the input function. Okay, let me do another example. Let's say I want to ask, or I want to know how old they are. So I can say, how old are you? So I have the question mark there already and a space. Then I'm going to run the code. So down here it says, how old are you? So I can say, I am 12. So when I enter that, it saves the information. So that is it, guys. That is it about variables. That's how to create them, name them, how to use them to ask for inputs from users. Next, let's talk about how you can use conditional logic in Python. So let's say, for instance, I have print here and I ask, is 3 equals to 5? And also, please take note that there's a difference between, okay, let's create a variable, let's say name, like I did just now, and I said Dennis. Okay, now there's a difference between this equal to sign and these ones right here. Now, I know you might be wondering why I use 2 equals sign up here. Now, this one down here is an assigner. I use this to assign the value Dennis to this name variable. Why this one up here? I am testing the equality between these two integers, that's 3 and 5. I want to know if 3 is equals to 5. So that's the difference. So when I get rid of this and I run this code, down here I get false. Now it's telling me that 3 is not equals to 5. So now when I change this to 3 not equals to 5, so I have an exclamation mark and then 1 equals sign. Now that is the not equal operator. So when I run this program, or if I run the code, I get true. So there are different operators like that. We have the equals to, which is 2 equals sign. We have the not equals to, which is the exclamation and then the equal sign. We have greater than, which is used to ask if a number is greater than the other, and then less than if a number is lesser than the other. And then we have greater than or equals to if a number is greater than or equals to another number. And then we have less than or equal to if a number is less than or equals to another number. If I change this not equal to let's say greater than, and I run this code, down here I get false. 3 is not greater than 5. If I add the less than operator, is 3 greater than 5 or is 3 less than 5? When I run the code down here, I'll get true because 3 is actually less than 5. So you can combine these operators and variables together. So let's say, for example, I want to apply for a job and the required age for the job is 18 years and I am less than that age. So let's create a variable. Let's call that my age, and then equate it to, let's say I'm 13. And then next, we're going to create another variable. Let's say job age. I'm going to assign 18. And then down here, let's say print. Now I want to know if I am old enough to get the job. So I would say, is my age. Down here you see I get suggestions. That's one good thing about using IDEs. You get helpful suggestions. Now I'm able to get suggestions because I already created the variable. So is my age equals to job age. You see I get another suggestion. So I'm just going to hit on enter and that variable will be selected. So is my age equals to job age. So when I run this, down here I get false. My age is not equals to the job age, so I can't apply for the job. Now if you look, this set of code is only checking for one condition. What if I want to add more conditions? Now this is where the if statement comes in. So I'm going to get rid of this line right here. I'm going to enter. So to write an if statement, all I need to do is to type the if, and then the condition. Once again, I want to check if my age is up to the age required for the job. So I'll say my age equals job age. At the end of the if statement, I am going to add a colon. Now, when I hit on the enter button on my keyboard, you see that it adds an indentation. So instead of the code starting right here in the beginning, or instead of the cursor to be right here in the beginning, it indents to this point. So whatever code or whatever I type in under this if statement becomes the child of the if statement. So right here, I'm going to type a set of code that will run when this condition is met. So let's say when the condition is met, I want it to print congratulations. You can apply for the job. But what if this condition is not met? What will happen? Will it print this statement? No, it won't. So if my age equals job age, it's going to print congratulations, you can apply for the job. So I'm going to increase this age right now. 18 is the age. Now when I run this code, down here it prints congratulations, you can apply for the job. Now this is just testing one condition. I want to test more than one condition. Now what if the age is not equals to 18? What will happen? So when I change this 18 to, let's say 1, and I run the code, you see down here, it doesn't print anything because I only ask it to print something, that is this congratulations, when the age are equal. So now I want to make it do something else when the age are not equal. So down here, I'm going to add an else statement. So if this condition is not true, is not met, is not going to run this code, then it will fall back to the else statement. So to type the else statement, I'll basically just type else colon, and then once again an indentation is added. So I'm going to write the piece of code that I want to run when the if statement's condition is not met. So I'll say print sorry, you can't apply for the job. So when I run this, it says sorry, you can't apply for the job. Okay, this is supposed to be can't. Let me add a T. Okay, so that's it. You can't apply for the job. Say sorry, you can't apply for the job. This is because my age is way less than the age required for the job. Now this is only checking for two conditions: if your age is equal and if your age is less. Now what if the job that I am trying to apply for, if you are older than 30, you cannot apply for the job also. Now I also want this program to tell me if I am too old for the job. So I'm going to add one more variable. Let's say too old variable. Let's equate that to 30. Now I can add a third condition, an elif or an else if condition. Now to add an else if condition, you are going to type in elif. Now elif stands for else if. So right now I'm going to say if my age is greater than too old, I'm going to add a colon. I'm going to say print sorry, you are too old for this job. So that's it. So right here I have if my age is equals to the age required for the job, it will print congratulations, you can apply for the job. But if my age is greater than too old age, that is the age required for the job, it's going to tell me sorry, you are too old for this job. But if these two conditions are not met, it's going to fall back to the else statement. So now when I increase this age to, when I increase my age to, let's say 40, and I run this code, it says, sorry, you are too old for this job. Now you can add as many else if statements if you want. It doesn't matter the number, but you can only have one if statement and one else statement. So between the if and the else statements, you can add as many else if statements as you want. So let's say, for example, I change this to else if statements. Let's say if my age is less than job age. Let's say it will say, sorry, you are too young for this job. And then for the else statement, else colon, I'll say print, please enter a valid information. So now what this is, so let's draw this a bit. Let's bring down the terminal. So up here, I am saying if my age is equals to that of the age required for the job, it should tell me, congratulations, you can apply for the job. But if my age is greater than 30, which is an age considered too old for the job, it should tell me, sorry, you are too old for this job. But if my age is less than the age required for the job, it should tell me, sorry, you are too young for this job. Otherwise, it's going to print, please enter a valid information. Now let me add a third else if statement. Elif, let's say if my age is less than too old, I want you to tell me, congratulations, you can apply for the job. In case you don't understand, so right here, if my age is less than the age considered too old for the job, that means I can apply for the job. So it's going to tell me, congratulations, you can apply for the job. So let's test this code out. So right here, I am going to change my age to, let's say, 10. Now when I run the code, it says, sorry, you are too young for this job. Now when I increase the age to, let's say, 24, and I run the code again, it says, congratulations, you can apply for the job. So when I enter, let's say 90, and I run the code, it says, you are too old for this job. So that is it. You can add as many else if statements as you want. Next, we are going to be talking about functions. If you have used other programming languages before, you might know them as methods. It's the same thing. Function, methods, they are the same thing. Although since the beginning of this video, we have been using function, or we have been using a function, the print function, for example, which we have used repeatedly in this video. We type in print and then we assign some text to it, and then when we run the program, it prints out the text. Now that is a function. Now that is a basic example of a function. It comes with Python. We can actually create or define our own function. I know you might be wondering, what is a function? A function is basically a block of code that you can write, package together, and then give it a name. And when you call that function, it does something in accordance with what you have designed it to do. Now, for example, when you call print, it prints out text. Now that is because it is already designed to do that. There are code that have been written to make that possible. Functions make your code modular and reusable. So for example, anytime we want to print something on the screen, we simply call the print function and then it prints whatever it is or whatever value we assign to it. We don't have to go through the stress of writing codes over and over again to be able to print text or values on the terminal. So we simply rely on the print function because it has already been designed to do that. So all we need to do is to call it and it's on the go. So let's go ahead. So I'm going to get rid of this codes right here, and then let's see how we can create our own function. So let's say, for example, I want a function that prints out a line of text multiple times, let's say like 3 to 4 times when I call the function. So to define that function, I'll type in def, which is short for define. And then I'm going to give the function a name. So let's say print multiple text. And then I'm going to add parentheses and then a colon. And I'm going to head over to the next line, and then I'm going to create a variable, let's say text, which is the text I want it to print. I'm going to say equals, and then let's say I want it to print subscribe to this channel. So I'm going to move to the next line, and then I'm going to say print text. And I'm going to copy this. So let's say I want the text to show up to 3 to 4 times. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it 3 more times. Now I've created, or I've defined my function. Now when I run this code, let's clear this terminal first. Now when I run this code, you see it doesn't print anything on the terminal because I have defined the function, but I haven't called the function yet. So I will have to call the function. So I would say print multiple text. Now when I run the code, you see down here, I get subscribe to this channel up to 4 times. Now that is how you define a function. First of all, use the keyword define, which is written as def here, def, define, and then the function name of your choice. Right here, I have print multiple text, and then parentheses, open and close, and then a colon. So after creating the function, I then went ahead to call the function. So wherever I reference this print multiple text in my code, it is going to print subscribe to this channel multiple times. So one thing you should also take note of is that you cannot call a function before you create them. So for instance, if I get rid of this function right here that I called, let's say I cut that out of that line, and then I paste it at the top before I created, or before I defined the function. When I run this code, down here, I get an error saying that the name print multiple text is not defined because I called the function before I printed it. Remember I said Python evaluates code line by line from the top. So when I run the code, at the top right here, it does not recognize anywhere I defined the function. So when I run the code, down here, I get an error. So up here, I called the function before I defined it. So Python does not know about the function yet. So it is after you define the function that you can call it. So if I get rid of this again and I put it down here after the definition of the function, now when I run it, you see it responds. You can also pass values in a function. For example, just like the way you pass values when you are about to print, like for example, I say print and I open parentheses and I type in whatever value I want to print out within the quotation. I can also do something similar when I define a function. So let's say, for example, I don't want this subscribe text to be within the function. I want to have the choice of passing in a value that I want the function to act upon. So I'm going to get rid of this text right here, that line. And then I'm going to put the text up here within the function parentheses. So let's say text. So when I call the function, I'll have to pass in whatever value I want the function to act upon. So let's say, for example, this time I'll type in my name is Dennis Kadiri. Now when I run this, first of all, let's get rid of this. Okay, so when I run this, down here, it prints out, my name is Dennis Kadiri up to 4 times. You can also add if statements within a function. So let's get rid of this first. Let me show you a quick example. So let's say I'm going to define another function. Let's say age calculator. And then I want to be able to pass 2 values. Let's say age and then name. And I'm going to add a colon. And then on the next line, I'll say if age is less than 18, I'm going to add my colon there. And on the next line, you see it indents that, which means that this block of code that I'm about to write belongs to the if statement, and the if statement belongs to the function that I'm defining. So I'll say print you are an adult. We have a printing out text all this while. Let's say I want to add, I also want to print out the value of a variable. I can do what is called string concatenation. Concatenation is where you add two different strings to form one. So after the quotation, after the closing quotation, I'm going to add a comma, and then I'm going to enter the name variable. So it's going to say you are an adult, and then whatever name I put there, let's say I put Dennis. So it's going to say you are an adult, Dennis. And then I can also add more strings. So I'll add a comma here again, and then open a quotation. I'll say enjoy your adulthood. So on the next line, I'm going to add an else if statement. So I'm going to say elif if age is less than 18. Okay, I think I made an error already. So this is supposed to be greater than. So that's it. So that's greater than, while this is less than. So if age is less than 18, I'm going to print you are still a child, and then comma, and then a name variable, and then comma again. I'll say enjoy your childhood. And I'm going to add one more condition. Now this time an else. Let's just add something random. Let's say print enjoy your life. So that's it. So now I am going to call the function. Now when I say age calculator, now I'm going to pass in two values. I'm going to say 12 and then Dennis. Now when I run this code, down here it says you are still a child, Dennis, enjoy your childhood. So that is how you use the if statement within your function. Just the way you can pass values in a function, you can also get values back from a function. So let's get rid of this set of code. So let's define a function. Let's say define age calculator. Now this time we're going to pass in two values again. Let's say year of birth, and then current year. And I'm going to add a colon. Then down here, I'm going to create another variable. I'll say age, and I'm going to say year of birth minus current year. And I'm going to come down here and I'll say return age. So after defining the function, down here I'll assign the function to a variable. So let's say my age. And then I'm going to assign the function to the variable. I'm going to say age calculator. And then within the parentheses, within the parentheses, I am going to pass the values. So I'll say, let's say year of birth 1960, and then current year 2023. So when I'm done with that, next I'm going to print the variable. So I'm going to say print open and close parentheses my age. Now when I run this code, down here I get minus 63, which is not supposed to be. There's something wrong up here. So I am supposed to minus the current year from the year of birth. So I'm going to switch this. So I'm going to say current year minus year of birth. So that's it. Now when I run this, now it gives me a positive answer, 63. So that's it. That's how to get a function to return a value. So let's test another example. Let's say I change this to year of birth to 2000 and then current year 2023. So if you are born in 2000, you are supposed to be 23 this year. So that is it, guys. So that is how to define the function, run the function, pass values in the function, and also get values back from a function. Next, we are going to look at loop. What is a loop? A loop allows you to execute a block of code multiple times. There are two types of loops. We have the while loop and we have the for loop. I'm going to get rid of this and then clear the terminal. So now let's start with a while loop. So I'll create a variable y and then assign 0 to it. And then on the next line, while, and then open brackets, y is less than 10. So while y is less than 10, I want it to do something. So I'm going to enter a colon, and then when I hit on enter, it indents the code again. So I'm going to say print y. Immediately after typing in print y, I want to make sure y is incremented after each iteration. Otherwise, I'm going to get an infinite loop. So I'm going to say y equals y plus 1. So now this code right here will increment y by 1 in every iteration. So if y is equals to 0 and 0 is less than 10, it's going to print 0. After printing 0, it's going to increase 0 by 1. 1 will be added to 0. Now 1 is still less than 10, so it's going to print 1. So after printing 1, it's going to increment 1 again by 1. So it's going to add 1 to 1, and y will be 2. And 2 is still less than 10, so it's going to print 2. And then after printing 2, it's going to increment it again by 1. So like that, till we get to 10. So once y equals 10, it is going to stop the loop. So let's run the code to see what we are talking about. So I'm going to hit on the run button up here. So here it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 till 9. So immediately y equals 10 and it's no longer less than 10, it stops. So that's why we have 0 to 9 here. So when it got to 9, it exited the loop and that's it. So that's how you can create a very simple loop. So there's a second loop called a for loop. So I'm going to get rid of this, say for loop. And this is also simple. So right here I can say for y in range, let's say 5 to 10. And then after that, I'm going to add a colon. And then on the next line, I'll say print y. So when I run this code, it's going to print all the values between 5 and 10. So when I hit on the run button up here, so down here, I get 5 up to 9. So it doesn't include 10. If you are following along with this lesson, you might have come across few errors along the line as you're trying to execute your codes, and they sometimes can be very difficult to resolve. So I'm going to go through 3 common errors and how you can resolve them. So let's say, for example, you're writing codes and let's say you create a variable name. Within the parentheses, type, let's say, Dennis, without the quotation. Now, when you run this code, it is going to throw an error because you didn't add the quotation. Now, Python is interpreting this as a variable instead of a value. Now, this type of error is known as a syntax error because you didn't follow the syntax rule. So all you need to do when you are in this situation is to carefully look at your code to see where you have missed 1 or 2 things. And when you come down to your terminal down here, you also get an insight of what type of error you have made or where you are having issues in the code. So right here, it says name error, name Dennis is not defined. So another type of error is the runtime error. So let's say, for instance, you say 5 divided by 0. Now, when you run this, again, it's going to throw an error. Obviously, you and I know that you cannot divide a number by 0. So when you try to do that, it will throw an error. So down here, it says 0 division error. So once again, if you encounter this type of error, come down here to your terminal and see what type of error you have committed. Once again, this will help you troubleshoot your code. So another type of error I would draw to your attention is the semantic error. So let's say, for instance, So again, I have this variable. So let's say I assign the value Dennis to it. And then down here, I say print I am name. And then I run the code. You see right here, it prints I am name. So now this type of error is very difficult to trace because everything looks like it's going well and it's not throwing an error. So if you have a lot of code, if you have thousands of code written, you will not be able to trace this kind of error. You're able to see that the value you are getting back is not correct, but you just can't trace where the error is because everything looks fine. In real sense, it is not fine. So when you get this type of error, you have to sit down quietly and slowly take your time, go through your code line by line to be able to catch this type of errors. They are very difficult and very annoying to treat. So when you get errors like this, you can go over to your Google and search for stackoverflow.com. So right there, you will see if other people have made similar errors, and also you'll be able to see how they were able to resolve those errors. So that is all I have for you in the introduction to Python. If you find this video helpful, please do well to give the video a like and also support this channel by subscribing and turn on post notifications so you get notified when I post a new video. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.